The billionaire stood frozen beneath the bright lights of the grocery store while the cashier quietly pushed his black metal card back across the counter. For the first time in 20 years, the man who could buy buildings with a phone call could not pay for a simple bag of groceries. Behind him, impatient customers began whispering. His face burned with embarrassment, but then he noticed someone watching him from the end of the checkout line. She was a little girl, perhaps 8 years old, wearing an oversized gray coat with frayed sleeves and shoes that were clearly too small for her feet. She held a paper bag against her chest, and inside that bag was everything she apparently owned. When she looked at the billionaire, there was no judgment in her eyes. There was only concern, and what she did next would leave one of America's richest men struggling to hold back tears. Before we begin, if you believe kindness still matters, that people deserve second chances, and that one small act can change a life, please take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. You never know when a simple message of kindness might reach someone who desperately needs it. It was a cold November evening in Chicago, Illinois, and the wind outside the small neighborhood grocery store cut through coats like a blade. Adrian Whitmore, a 48-year-old billionaire who owned technology companies, apartment buildings, and investment firms across the country, had spent the entire day surrounded by lawyers, executives, and people who wanted something from him. His private driver had been waiting outside for nearly an hour, but Adrian had unexpectedly asked him to leave. He wanted to walk. He wanted to feel normal for once. It had been almost 7 years since Adrian had walked through a grocery store without security, assistance, or people recognizing him. That evening, he had driven himself to a modest neighborhood store because he needed coffee, bread, fruit, and a few other things for his empty apartment. His life was strangely complicated despite his wealth. He had a 12-room home overlooking Lake Michigan, yet most nights he ate alone. Adrian had learned early in life that money could solve many problems, but it could not make people stay. His father had died when Adrian was 17, leaving behind debt and a small repair shop. His mother had worked 2 jobs to keep them alive, and Adrian had spent his youth fixing broken machines after school. He remembered eating canned soup for 3 days because there had been nothing else in the kitchen. He remembered his mother pretending she wasn't hungry, so he could have the last piece of bread. Those memories had made him wealthy. But somewhere along the way, they had also made him afraid. Afraid of losing everything. Afraid of trusting people. Afraid of needing anyone. So Adrian built walls around himself, and then he filled those walls with money. That evening, he stood at the checkout with only a handful of groceries. The cashier scanned each item while Adrian stared absently at his phone. A business partner in New York had sent him an urgent message about a multi-million-dollar acquisition, but Adrian barely read it. Then the cashier looked at him apologetically and said that his card had been declined. Adrian frowned. He tried it again. Declined. He pulled another card from his wallet. Declined. For several seconds, he simply stared at the screen. There was no possible reason. His accounts contained more money than most people could imagine. He called his bank, but the representative explained that there was a temporary security freeze because of unusual activity. It could take several hours to resolve. Several hours. For a moment, Adrian felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood. Helplessness. He looked at the groceries on the counter. Bread, milk, coffee, apples, soup. Nothing luxurious. Nothing expensive. The cashier offered to put the items aside while he returned later. Adrian nodded, embarrassed, and began collecting his things. That's when a small voice behind him stopped him. The little girl in the oversized gray coat stepped forward. Her name was Grace Miller. She had come to the store with her younger brother, Caleb, who was 6 years old, and their mother, Hannah. Hannah had been waiting outside because she was trying to find a way to make the last few dollars in her wallet cover dinner and the bus ride home. Grace looked at Adrian's groceries. Then she looked at his face. Then, without saying anything, she opened her little paper bag. Inside was a sandwich wrapped carefully in wax paper, an apple, and a few coins. She counted the coins in her palm. $4.17. It was everything she had. She walked to the counter and placed the coins beside Adrian's groceries. The cashier looked confused. Adrian looked at the girl. Grace quietly explained that he could use her money. Adrian immediately shook his head and told her she needed it more than he did. But Grace didn't move. She insisted. To her, there was nothing strange about helping someone who needed it. She didn't know Adrian was a billionaire. She didn't know his companies were worth billions. She didn't know that the watch on his wrist cost more than her family's car. She only knew that a man looked embarrassed and needed help. And somehow that was enough. Adrian crouched down so they were eye to eye. He asked her why she would give away everything she had. Grace looked toward the store entrance where her mother was standing. She explained that her mother always told her that when you have something someone else needs, you should share it. Adrian swallowed hard. Those words sounded painfully familiar. His mother had said almost the same thing when he was 17. The difference was that Adrian had spent the next 30 years forgetting them. Grace pushed the coins closer. She said that if he couldn't pay, maybe they could share. For the first time that night, Adrian smiled. But it was a broken smile. He looked at the sandwich in her bag and asked if she had eaten. Grace nodded quickly. It was obvious she was lying. Adrian knew that look. He had seen it in the mirror as a teenager. The cashier quietly revealed that Grace's mother had asked earlier if there was any way to buy food on credit. The family had been struggling since Hannah lost her cleaning job after injuring her wrist. Her husband had left months earlier, leaving her with 2 children and unpaid bills. Adrian stood there silently. A strange feeling filled his chest. He looked at the little girl again. She had $4.17. And she had offered all of it to a stranger. Adrian suddenly felt ashamed of his own life. Not because he was rich, because he had forgotten what his mother had taught him. He asked Grace and her mother to wait. Then he paid for their groceries. Not with a black card, with cash. He bought enough food to fill 2 shopping carts. Hannah tried to refuse, embarrassed and suspicious. She assumed Adrian wanted something in return. People rarely helped her without expecting something. But Adrian told her there was nothing to repay. He simply remembered what it felt like to need help. Then he did something unexpected. He asked Grace what she wanted most for Christmas. Grace hesitated. She didn't ask for a toy. She didn't ask for a tablet. She didn't ask for expensive clothes. She looked at her mother and said she wanted their apartment to stay warm. Adrian felt his throat tighten. Their heat had been shut off. That night, Adrian couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the girl with the $4.17. He walked through his enormous apartment, past artwork worth millions, furniture imported from Europe, and windows overlooking the city. Everything looked beautiful. Everything felt empty. At 3 a.m, Adrian called his assistant. He asked her to find every bill associated with Hannah Miller, but he didn't stop there. He wanted to know why a family could lose heating while he had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars that year on things he barely remembered buying. The next morning, Adrian went back to the neighborhood. He found Hannah working temporary shifts at a diner. She was shocked to see him. Adrian told her he wasn't there to rescue her. He was there to offer her an opportunity. His company needed a facilities coordinator at one of its Chicago offices. The job paid well, included health insurance, and offered flexible hours so she could care for her children. Hannah had no degree. She had never worked in an office. Adrian didn't care. He had seen something more valuable. She was responsible. She was hardworking. And she had raised a daughter who believed $4.17 could save a stranger. Hannah accepted the opportunity. But Adrian still hadn't told her who he really was. He didn't want Grace to see him differently. Weeks passed. Hannah began working. The family moved into a safe apartment. The heat came back on. Caleb got a proper winter coat. Grace received new shoes, but she kept her old ones in a box because she said they reminded her how far she had come. Meanwhile, Adrian changed too. He began visiting the community center near the grocery store. He met families struggling with rent, food, transportation, and medical bills. For the first time in decades, he stopped asking how much money he could make and started asking what his money could mean. He created a small foundation, but he insisted that it remain anonymous. He paid utility bills for families who were about to lose heat. He funded grocery cards. He created emergency housing assistance. He quietly helped single parents find employment. Still, he never forgot Grace. One afternoon, nearly a year after their first meeting, Adrian received an invitation to the community center's winter celebration. Grace was there. She had grown taller. She ran toward him with a smile. Then she handed him a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note and $4. Adrian stared at the money. He recognized the amount immediately. Grace had been saving it. She told him she wanted him to have it. Adrian asked why. She explained that when she gave him her money that night, she believed he needed it. Now she wanted him to keep some of her money, so he would always remember that nobody was too poor to help someone else. Adrian couldn't speak. The billionaire who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking stood in the middle of a community center with tears running down his face. Grace hugged him, and Adrian finally understood something his mother had tried to teach him all those years ago. Kindness was never measured by how much you could afford to give. It was measured by how much you were willing to give when you didn't have much yourself. Years later, Adrian would tell the story of the declined card at nearly every foundation meeting. He never mentioned Grace's full name. He simply called her the little girl who taught a billionaire what wealth really meant. His foundation eventually helped thousands of families across the United States. But Adrian always kept one thing inside his wallet. Not a credit card. Not a photograph. Not a business card. For $17. The original coins Grace had offered him that cold November evening. They became his most valuable possession. Because every time Adrian saw them, he remembered the night his card was declined and believed, for a few painful minutes, that he had nothing. Then a poor little girl showed him that he had everything he needed to become a better man. Money had once been Adrian's definition of wealth. Grace changed that. From then on, wealth meant having enough compassion to notice someone else's pain, enough courage to help, and enough humility to accept that sometimes the person who saves you isn't the richest person in the room. Sometimes they're the smallest. Sometimes they're carrying their entire world inside a paper bag. And sometimes they have only $4.17. Yet somehow, they give you everything. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us that humanity is still alive. And before you go, leave a comment saying, kindness is true wealth, if you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life. Because you never know who is standing beside you, quietly struggling. You never know who needs a little hope. And you never know when the person with the least to give might be the one who gives you the greatest gift of all.